The tension was palpable. Hope and doubt wrestling inside every heart. Some clutched each other and smiled through tears, imagining real change. Others stood rigid, unwilling to let their guard down after so many betrayals. At the edge of the crowd, Malik held up his phone, live streaming the moment. His viewers shot comments across the screen. This is history. Don't trust them. Demand receipts. Angela for mayor. Back inside, Angela had no idea that her demands were already being woven into chants, echoing across the city square. The world outside was waiting for her voice, and it was growing louder by the second. Ink on the table. The room had shifted. What started as a tense standoff now felt like the slow turning of gears that had been rusted shut for years. The mayor's chief of staff spread out a legal pad and began outlining points in neat, hurried handwriting. Each bullet seemed to echo Angela's voice. Immediate family notification upon detainment. Mandatory deployment of mental health professionals. Public access to body cam footage. Independent investigations for all in-custody deaths. Disciplinary consequences with no shield from accountability. Angela watched closely, her arms folded. Every time the pen wavered, she leaned in. No loopholes, she warned. Don't bury this in language no one can understand. Say it plain. The mayor exhaled. You're right. It has to be plain. It has to be strong. One advisor, clearly uncomfortable, spoke up. This could ignite the union. They'll push back hard. Angela didn't flinch. My son is gone. If you're more afraid of a union than a grieving community, then you've already failed. Silence settled. The mayor gave a firm nod, gesturing for the pen to keep moving. Jamal leaned back in his chair, a hint of pride in his eyes. History's being written right here, he murmured. Angela thought of David. She pictured his smile, the way he used to doodle in his notebooks, his restless energy, his quiet jokes. If he could see her now, facing down a room full of power brokers, she knew he'd be proud. But the thought also ached. Pride couldn't erase the hollow space at her dinner table. Change couldn't bring him home. Angela blinked back tears, grounding herself in the only truth she had left. If she couldn't save her son, she would save someone else's. As the final bullet point was scrawled onto paper, the mayor looked up. Tomorrow morning, he said, we announce this together. The city will hear us side by side. Angela's heart pounded. Tomorrow wasn't just another day. It would be the beginning of a fight far bigger than anything she'd faced before. The longest night. Angela closed the door behind her and leaned against it, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding all day. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed distant, muffled by the heaviness in her chest. She walked into the living room, where David's photographs lined the wall. His high school graduation picture, his wide grin at his cousin's wedding, a candid shot of him holding a basketball under one arm, looking off into the distance as though the whole world was waiting for him. Angela sat on the couch and let her fingers trace the edges of the frame. We're getting closer, baby, she whispered. They're listening, not because they want to, but because they have to. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. Tomorrow, they'll hear your name from the mayor's lips, and I'll make sure they never forget it. Never again will they think our boys are disposable. Jamal padded softly into the room, his hair mussed from sleep. He rubbed his eyes. You're still up? Angela smiled weakly. Couldn't sleep. He sat beside her, resting his head on her shoulder. Me neither. For a long moment, they sat in silence, just mother and son, both holding on to the memory of the boy who should have been sitting there with them. Finally, Jamal spoke. Mom, do you think tomorrow will change anything? Angela swallowed hard. She wanted to promise him yes, that tomorrow will be the start of something new, that their pain had finally carved a path toward justice. But she also knew the truth. Change was a fight that stretched beyond one press conference. Still, she tightened her arm around him. Tomorrow won't fix everything, but it will light a fire. And once it's burning, we won't let it go out. Jamal nodded, leaning into her. Then we'll keep it burning. For David. Angela closed her eyes, pressing her cheek against his hair. In that moment, she didn't feel like just a grieving mother. She felt like a soldier preparing for battle. Tomorrow, the world would hear her voice, and she would not waver. The gathering storm. By sunrise, the city square was already alive. Drums echoed against the walls of City Hall. Banners stretched high above the crowd, and chants rolled like thunder through the streets. People had traveled from neighboring towns, some even from other states, just to stand shoulder to shoulder in this moment. Mothers pushed strollers draped with signs that read, "Never again." College students painted slogans across their cheeks. Clergy in long robes held candles, though the morning sun made their flames nearly invisible. At the front of the crowd, a grandmother lifted a poster board with a single photograph taped to it. David, smiling, the glow of life in his eyes. She held it high above her head, trembling but unyielding. The crowd swelled until it felt less like a protest and more like a tidal wave, uncontainable, unstoppable. Reporters jockeyed for space, microphones raised like weapons aimed at the building. Every face was turned toward the steps, waiting. And yet, beneath the chanting, there was a different kind of silence, the heavy, expectant pause before history bends. Malik streamed the entire scene, narrating into his phone. This is bigger than one family, bigger than one case. What you're looking at right now is a city, on the edge of transformation. They said this day would never come. But look at us, we are here. In the distance, the heavy wooden doors of City Hall creaked open. Police officers emerged first, lining the steps, but this time their stance wasn't confrontational. It was protective, forming a corridor. And then, like a spark in dry grass, a murmur tore through the crowd. They're coming. Angela stepped into the sunlight, the mayor at her side. Cameras flashed. Chants erupted. The noise rose so loud it seemed to shake the earth beneath their feet. Angela tightened her grip on the folded piece of paper in her hands. The speech she had written at 3 a.m., sitting at her kitchen table under the soft glow of the lamp. Today wasn't just about David. Today was about every name spoken at vigils, every family who had been forced to bury a child too soon. The storm had gathered. Now it was time to speak. The mayor's words. The mayor adjusted the microphone, his hands trembling slightly despite his practiced composure. The cameras were already rolling live across the nation, capturing every blink, every pause, every bead of sweat. Behind him stood Angela, shoulders square, her presence commanding even in silence. He cleared his throat. "Good morning." The crowd erupted instantly. Boos, cheers, shouts of justice for David. The sound surged like a wave, threatening to drown him out. He raised his hand, waited, and then continued. "We are here today because a young man, David Harris, lost his life in the custody of the city's police department. His death was not only a tragedy, it was a failure the systems meant to protect us, a failure of leadership, and a failure of accountability." The crowd went quiet. It wasn't the usual evasive language they were used to hearing. This sounded different. The mayor pressed on, his voice steady. Effective immediately, the officers involved in David's arrest are suspended without pay pending a full investigation. In addition, we are establishing an independent oversight board, composed of community leaders, clergy, and legal experts, to ensure that no investigation into police misconduct is ever again hidden behind closed doors. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Journalists scribbled furiously. For the first time, the possibility of true accountability didn't feel like a distant dream. But he wasn't finished. The mayor turned slightly, gesturing to Angela. None of this would be happening without the courage of one woman, David's mother, Angela Harris. She stood where few could stand, demanded justice when silence would have been easier, and reminded us all of the cost of complacency. Today, I step aside and give her floor. The applause was thunderous, but Angela heard none of it. Her heart pounded in her ears as she stepped forward, unfolding the paper in her hand. The city was waiting. The world was watching. And she was ready. Her voice, their roar. Angela stepped up to the microphone. The morning sun burned over the crowd, but she felt only the weight of the eyes and hearts turned toward her. She unfolded the paper in her hands. Though she didn't need it, every word had been etched in her memory. My son's name was David Harris, she began, her voice shaking but growing stronger with each syllable. He was a boy with laughter in his heart, dreams in his eyes, and a future he never got to live. He was taken from me in the back of a squad car, alone, unseen, unheard, and they thought his story would end there. A hush fell. Even the journalists leaned in, sensing that this wasn't a speech. It was a reckoning. They were wrong, Angela continued, because I am here, and because every mother, every father, every brother, every sister who has ever lost a child in silence is here. David's life will not be forgotten. His name will not be erased, and his death will not be in vain. Tears streaked down her cheeks as she looked across the faces in the crowd. Strangers, neighbors, reporters, clergy, students, all hanging on her words. She clenched the paper tighter. I am not asking for your sympathy. I am demanding your action. Suspensions, investigations, reform, these are not gifts. They are the bare minimum of justice. And I will not rest until every system that allowed this to happen is held accountable. The crowd erupted into chants. David, David, David. Their voices shook the square like thunder. Angela drew in a deep breath and raised her voice higher. Change will not come if we whisper. Change will not come if we wait. Change will come if we speak, if we march, if we stand together and never, ever look away. The crowd surged forward, fists in the air, tears streaming down faces. Mothers held children above their heads, the little ones echoing the chant. David, David, David. Angela lowered her voice, letting it crack, letting the grief spill into the open. I loved him. I will always love him. And I will carry his name, his memory, and his fight for the rest of my life. But I am not alone. You are not alone. Together, we will make this city, this country, and this world a place where no more mothers have to stand here and speak for their lost children. The square roared in agreement, a tidal wave of sound, a chorus of grief and hope intertwined. The mayor watched from the side, humbled. Reporters dropped their scripts. Journalists who had come to cover a political announcement were now witnesses to a mother's power and a city's awakening. Angela stepped back from the microphone. Her voice was hoarse, her body trembling, but her heart was unbroken. For the first time since David's death, she felt the spark of something unstoppable. Outside City Hall, the chants didn't stop. They only grew louder, carrying her son's name beyond the square, across the city, across the nation. David Harris had been taken from her, but through her courage, his voice had become eternal. The first ripples. The square slowly emptied, but the energy lingered like electricity in the air. People hugged, cried, and shouted David's name long after the speech had ended. News crews scrambled to capture the final moments, their cameras still rolling, while social media exploded with live streams, posts, and hashtags. Hashtag Justice for David. Hashtag Angela Turner Speaks. Hashtag They Can't Silence Love. Inside City Hall, the mayor convened a meeting with his top aides. The speech had done what no briefing, no memo, no political maneuvering could. It had humanized the crisis and put public pressure beyond measure. We can't delay, one advisor said, flipping through notes. They're watching. Millions of people. Every decision now will be scrutinized. The mayor nodded, steeling himself. Then we act, draft the reform package, implement the oversight board, notify families immediately. Every bullet point Angela demanded goes live by the end of the week. Meanwhile, Angela returned home, exhausted but alive with purpose. Neighbors greeted her with applause, flowers, and tears. Children waved posters with her son's face, chanting his name. She could feel the city's heartbeat pulsing in her chest. Denise handed her a cup of tea. Look at what you did today, she said softly. You've given them hope. And hope changes things. Angela leaned back, letting the moment settle in. She knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead was long, filled with bureaucratic hurdles, public scrutiny, and personal grief. But for the first time in months, she felt like she could carry the weight. At night, she sat by David's memorial in the living room, lit a candle, and whispered, "This is for you, baby. Your name will live. Your story will change lives. And I won't stop." Outside, the city moved, changed, its pulse altered by a mother who refused to stay silent. Her voice had become a spark, and sparks, she knew, could ignite fires that light the world. Sparks of change. By the end of the week, City Hall was buzzing with action. The mayor's office released the first official statement outlining the reforms Angela had demanded. Immediate notification protocols for families. Independent civilian oversight boards with full investigative authority. Mandatory deployment of mental health professionals alongside officers. Transparent access to body camera footage. Strict accountability measures for officers found guilty of misconduct. News outlets covered every detail. Headlines praised Angela as the driving force behind the historic shift. One morning newspaper read, "One mother, one son, one city. Angela Turner ignites reform." Across social media, stories poured in from parents, students, and community leaders inspired by her courage. Hashtags like #TheyCan'tSilenceLove trended worldwide. People shared their own experiences with police injustice, creating a tapestry of voices that could no longer be ignored. At home, Angela watched it all with Denise and Jamal, a mix of awe, exhaustion, and determination on her face. "I never thought speaking my grief would have this effect," she whispered. Denise smiled, squeezing her hand. "It's because you spoke truth. People can feel truth. It can't be hidden. It travels." Jamal, scrolling through his phone, looked up, eyes wide. "Mom, there's a petition from teachers, lawyers, even athletes. They want to meet to help push this through. They're calling it David's Law." Angela's chest tightened. Her son's name, her baby, was being carried on the shoulders of strangers and friends alike. It was more than she had imagined possible. Outside, the city was already changing. Neighborhood groups formed councils to monitor police interactions. Clergy organized town halls. Students staged peaceful marches demanding accountability. Angela's speech had become a spark that ignited countless others, all determined to ensure David's death would not be in vain. And through it all, Angela kept returning to the candlelit memorial in her living room. Every night, she whispered, "This is for you, David. Your story will protect others. Your name will live, and we will fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Recognition and resolve. Within weeks, Angela Turner's voice had crossed city lines. Invitations arrived from advocacy groups, universities, and even national news networks. Interviews, panel discussions, and speaking engagements became her new reality. Everywhere she went, people introduced themselves with gratitude. "Your son's story saved my brother. Because of you, my neighborhood council is now demanding transparency. Thank you for making the city listen." Angela felt both humbled and overwhelmed. Each encounter brought pride and a pang of grief. David wasn't here to see this. Yet, she could feel him in the collective energy, in the faces of people determined to fight alongside her. At home, she tried to find normalcy. Meals with Jamal, walks in the park, quiet moments with Denise. But the work never truly left her. Reforms were being implemented. Families were now informed immediately after arrests. Oversight boards held public hearings. Officers faced real accountability when misconduct was proven. The first visible victory came when one officer involved in David's case was formally charged. Angela attended the hearing quietly, clutching David's photo in her hands. She didn't scream or cry. She simply breathed in the justice unfolding before her, a long-awaited acknowledgement that her fight had teeth. Nationally, Angela became a symbol not of anger, but of resilience. News outlets highlighted her courage, her insistence on truth, and her unwavering demand that the city and the world act. Invitations for awards and recognition poured in, but she accepted only those that amplified David's story, not her own fame. At night, she would return to her living room, light a candle by David Memorial, and reflect on the journey. She allowed herself small moments of healing, laughter with Jamal, quiet gratitude with Denise, and letters from strangers sharing how her courage inspired them. Angela realized that grief and hope could coexist. She could carry David's absence while building a future that honored him. And in doing so, she wasn't just his mother anymore. She had become a guardian for every child who might otherwise be forgotten. Ripples across the city. Months had passed since Angela Turner first stepped onto the City Hall steps. The reforms she had fought for were no longer just words on paper. They were policies enforced, programs launched, and communities mobilized. Neighborhoods now had independent civilian oversight liaisons who met monthly with local police. Schools invited officers and mental health professionals for dialogue sessions. Families reported quicker notifications after detainments, and transparency had become a standard rather than an exception. Angela watched this ripple effect quietly. Often with tears, she allowed herself in private. One morning, Jamal ran into her room, holding a newspaper. "Mom, look," he exclaimed. The headline read, "David's Law, First Steps Toward Accountability in Police Reform." Angela clutched the paper, her heart swelling. For the first time, she felt the tangible weight of her fight. David's story had sparked not just a conversation, but change. Even the mayor, once cautious and political, began publicly acknowledging Angela's role. He credited her for pushing him to act beyond appearances, to make accountability real. Their partnership became a model for other cities wrestling with systemic reform. Beyond policy, the emotional impact was profound. Families across the nation reached out, thanking her for giving them courage to speak up, to fight for justice, and to grieve without shame. Communities began healing collectively, their shared voices amplified by Angela's steadfast determination. One evening, as Angela sat by David's memorial, the candle flickering softly in the quiet room, she felt a peace she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. She whispered to the photograph, "Look at this, baby. They're listening. They're changing. You are not forgotten, David. Your name will always matter, and I promise I'll never stop fighting for the ones who can't fight for themselves." Denise came over and held her shoulder. "You've done more than anyone could imagine, Angela. You've turned grief into action, pain into purpose." Angela smiled faintly, a tear tracing her cheek. "It still hurts," she admitted, "but I feel him here, guiding me. Every step I take, every voice we amplify, it's for him." Outside, the city pulsed with life, awareness, and hope. And in her living room, surrounded by photographs and memories, Angela realized something extraordinary. Her fight had transformed sorrow into justice, anger into accountability, and grief into a movement that would ripple through generations. For David, for every child who deserved to be seen, heard, and protected. And in that quiet moment, Angela knew the story that began with tragedy had grown into a legacy of courage, resilience, and unyielding love. Beyond the city, Angela's story didn't stop at the city limits. News outlets carried her voice nationwide. Civic organizations, lawmakers, and activists invited her to speak at conferences, rallies, and universities. Her name became synonymous with courage and accountability, a living testament to what one determined mother could accomplish. In Washington, D.C., policymakers referenced David's Law as a model for potential national legislation. Families from other states contacted Angela, sharing their own stories of loss and injustice. Each message reminded her that while she could not bring her son back, she could ensure his death sparked lasting change. At home, life had shifted in quiet but profound ways. Jamal thrived, inspired by his mother's resilience, now understanding the power of standing for what is right. Denise continued to be her anchor, celebrating each small victory, each new ripple of reform. Angela, meanwhile, had grown in ways she never imagined. She learned to channel grief into strategy, anger into action, and despair into hope. Though the ache of losing David remained, it no longer paralyzed her. It propelled her forward. One evening, as she walked through a community center now hosting workshops on police accountability, a young mother approached her with tears in her eyes. "Your courage saved my son," the woman whispered. "I thought I was alone. I thought my voice didn't matter." Angela held her hand and said softly, "You're never alone. That's why we fight, so every voice counts." Later, standing on a balcony overlooking the city, Angela reflected on the journey. From the darkest moment, the back of a squad car where David's life was taken, to this, a city transformed, a nation awakened, and a legacy growing with every action inspired by one mother's refusal to be silenced. She lit a candle in David's memory that night, letting it burn long into the evening. The flame flickered, casting light across the photographs that filled her living room. And for the first time in months, Angela allowed herself to feel not just sorrow, but pride, hope, and a quiet, enduring peace. "Rest easy, baby," she whispered. "You're making a difference. You always have been." And outside, the city breathed, alive with the promise of justice, resilience, and the courage of those willing to stand. Even when the world seemed to turn its back. Foundations of justice. Months turned into a year, and the policies Angela had fought for began to take root. The independent oversight boards convened regularly, and officers were held accountable for misconduct without delay. Community feedback became integral to law enforcement strategy. Police departments adopted training programs emphasizing de-escalation and mental health awareness. Neighborhood watch councils were established, and families affected by custody-related deaths had a direct line to report issues. Angela watched the city change, often quietly from her living room or in community meetings. What had once seemed impossible, a mother influencing systemic reform, was now reality. David's story had become more than a symbol. It had become the framework for real, lasting change. One afternoon, a ceremony was held to officially recognize David's law. Angela stood at the podium, Jamal by her side. The mayor and city council members applauded, but the real audience was the community. Families, neighbors, clergy, and children who had been part of the movement filled the square. Angela's eyes scanned the crowd. She saw hope, resilience, and determination reflected in every face. The same faces that had once chanted outside City Hall now celebrated tangible progress. Her voice steady, she said, "Today we honor not just David, but every life affected by injustice. We remember them, and we commit ourselves to ensuring no family ever experiences the pain we endured. This is the work we continue together, and it begins here." Applause erupted. For Angela, it wasn't about recognition. It was about accountability, remembrance, and hope. Peace in the flames. That evening, after the ceremony, Angela returned home with Jamal and Denise. The city skyline glowed in the distance, a mosaic of lights that felt alive with possibility. She sat by David's memorial, lit a candle, and let the day's events wash over her. She reflected on the journey, the despair in the hospital, the lonely nights, the endless frustration, the rallies, the speeches, the negotiations, the moments she had almost given up. And now, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Peace. Her hand rested on David's photograph. "We did it, baby," she whispered. "Your story changed the city. Your life, though cut short, became a beacon. You're still here, guiding every step we take." Jamal leaned against her shoulder. "Mom, do you think it's really over?" Angela smiled faintly. "No, baby. Change is never really over. But we've started something that will keep growing. And that's enough for now." Denise hugged her, and for the first time in months, Angela let herself cry. Not from grief, but from relief and hope. She realized that her love for David had become a force bigger than herself. It had transformed sorrow into justice, silence into action, and fear into courage. Outside, the city hummed with life, aware of its past mistakes, but moving toward a brighter future. And inside that quiet living room, Angela finally allowed herself to imagine a world where mothers didn't have to fight for their children's safety, and where voices like hers would always be heard. She whispered one last time, "Rest easy, my sweet boy. We're carrying your light, your name, your story, and we will never let it go out." The candle flickered, a small flame holding the warmth of love, courage, and hope. And in that light, Angela Turner felt the first stirrings of true healing. The movement grows. The weeks following the official recognition of David's law were filled with action. Neighborhood councils reported higher engagement from families. Schools invited police officers and social workers for open discussions. Local media featured stories of community members inspired by Angela's courage. Angela traveled to community centers across the city, speaking to groups both large and small. Her message was simple yet powerful. Grief can be a weapon if we wield it with courage. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And together, we can ensure that no more lives are lost in silence. At each event, she met mothers, fathers, and children who had faced tragedy, just as she had. They shared their stories, cried, and left with renewed determination. Angela's presence wasn't just symbolic. It was a catalyst for change. Even the mayor noted the transformation. Angela has shown me what it truly means to lead with courage, he told his advisors. The city isn't just implementing policies. It's changing at heart. One evening, Jamal came home from school holding a drawing he'd made for David. It showed a city with smiling families, officers shaking hands with children, and a bright sun rising above it all. Angela held him close. "See, baby," she said softly, "your light is everywhere now." And outside, the city began to feel different. Streets felt safer. Families felt seen. Community members felt empowered. David's name was no longer just a memory. It was a movement beyond the borders. News of David's law began to spread beyond the city. National networks picked up the story, highlighting Angela's courage and the tangible reforms taking shape. Legislators in other states reached out, asking for guidance on implementing similar policies in their jurisdictions. Angela was invited to speak at conferences, universities, and civic panels. Wherever she went, she carried David's story and a larger message. Systemic change is possible when individuals refuse to stay silent. During one televised interview, a reporter asked, "How do you stay strong after such a personal loss?" Angela looked directly into the camera, her voice unwavering. "Strength comes from purpose. My son's life was taken, but his story can protect others. Grief is heavy, but if we channel it into action, it becomes unstoppable. That is what keeps me moving forward." The public response was overwhelming. Social media campaigns, petitions, and community rallies flourished in multiple cities. Mothers, fathers, and young activists cited Angela as their inspiration, creating local groups dedicated to police accountability and civic engagement. Even the White House took notice. Invitations arrived for policy roundtables on justice reform, with Angela serving as a key voice representing communities affected by in-custody deaths. At home, Angela reflected on the journey. The pain of losing David was still present, but it no longer felt like a chain holding her down. Instead, it had become fuel that empowered her to push for systemic change, inspire others, and ensure that no life would be treated as disposable. One evening, she looked at the skyline from her living room window, Jamal asleep beside her. She whispered to the night, "David, we've started something that can't be stopped. Your name, your life, your story. It will continue to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The city glimmered below, a living testament to hope, courage, and the enduring power of one mother's love. Years had passed, but the name David Harris had not faded. It had grown. Angela Turner watched communities thrive, young activists speak up, and families reclaim their voices. What began in grief had transformed into a movement of hope, justice, and enduring change. She stood by David's memorial, the candle flickering softly. Jamal held her hand, and for a moment, the weight of loss lifted, replaced by pride and peace. "David," Angela whispered, "your life didn't end that night. It began something greater. Every voice we raise, every life we protect, carries your light forward. You are not gone. You live in every change, every heart, every act of courage." Outside, the city pulsed with life. Safer streets, empowered communities, and children learning the power of speaking up. Angela realized that even in the darkest tragedies, love and courage can ignite ripples that last generations. And as she watched the candles flame dance in night, she knew this truth. One life lost can inspire a legacy that never dies. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience with a sense of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of justice. Every case we tell is more than tragedy. It's a call to action, a spark of change, and a reminder of our shared humanity. Subscribe to Dark Case Diaries, and let's keep these stories alive together.